The neighborhood of Maple Grove looked perfect on the outside, freshly mowed lawns, matching mailboxes, and the ever-watchful eyes of the HOA. But beneath that picture-perfect surface, there was one person who made life miserable for everyone: Karen Morrison, the self-proclaimed neighborhood standards queen. She didn't have an official HOA title, but her clipboard and constant complaining gave her more power than the actual board. Tom Reed, lived right next door. A quiet guy, ex-contractor, widower, someone who just wanted peace. But peace and Karen could never exist in the same sentence. It started after a massive windstorm last winter. A large oak tree branch fell across my yard, crushing a section of my wooden fence. The damage wasn't small. It splintered nearly 15 feet of wood panels. I was planning to rebuild it, but between bad weather and long work hours, it had to wait a few weeks. Karen, of course, saw it as a personal offense. She showed up at my doorstep one morning with her signature smirk and a neon pink clipboard in hand. "Tom," she said in that syrupy sweet tone that could curdle milk, "your broken fence is bringing down the neighborhood's appearance. It's an eyesore." "I'm aware, Karen," I replied, keeping my patience. "I'll fix it once I have the time." She chuckled, a high, mocking laugh. "Time? The HOA doesn't wait for excuses. I'll be submitting a violation report today." I clenched my jaw but said nothing. I knew arguing with Karen was like wrestling a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it. For the next week, she strutted past my yard every day, snapping photos, gossiping to neighbors, and laughing loudly whenever she saw the fence. "That poor fence looks like it's been through a tornado," she'd say. Little did she know karma was already watching her closely. That weekend, the news predicted another severe storm, one that could rival last year's. The neighbors began preparing, securing patio furniture, trimming trees and covering windows. But Karen? She stood in her yard bragging that her brand new roof and gutters could survive anything. That night, as the wind began howling, I stood on my porch watching the sky turn an angry gray. I noticed Karen laughing under her porch light, sipping wine, mocking me again as I hammered extra support into my broken fence. "Still fixing that thing? Waste of time!" she shouted through the wind. I simply nodded and kept working. Because deep down I knew storms don't care about perfection. And when that storm hit, it didn't just shake fences. It tore pride to pieces. The storm rolled in faster than any forecast had warned. Within minutes, the calm evening turned into chaos. The wind roared like a train, lightning split the sky, and rain lashed against every surface. My patched-up fence groaned under the pressure. But I had reinforced it with steel brackets earlier that day. I wasn't sure it would hold, but I hoped. Across the street, Karen's porch light flickered wildly before going out. I could still see her silhouette through the flashes of lightning. She stood by her large glass window, watching in disbelief as the storm ripped through the neighborhood. Her perfect lawn ornaments tumbled down the street like toys. The "Welcome to Maple Grove, HOA approved" sign she proudly designed was ripped right off its post. A deafening crack echoed through the night. I looked up just in time to see a massive branch snap off a tree near Karen's property. It crashed straight into her pristine white picket fence, shattering it like matchsticks. I winced, not out of sympathy, but because irony had just struck with brutal precision. "Serves her right," I muttered under my breath. Suddenly I saw movement. Karen darting outside in a raincoat, screaming over the howling wind. "My fence! My new fence!" she cried as if the storm cared. She tried to drag the fallen branch away, but the wind was too strong. Within seconds, it blew her umbrella out of her hands and nearly knocked her down. I rushed out, fighting against the wind, and shouted, "Karen! Get inside before something hits you!" But she was too busy yelling at the sky. "This is ridiculous! Why isn't the HOA doing anything?" I couldn't help it. I almost laughed. The HOA couldn't control the weather, but knowing Karen, she'd probably try to file a complaint against Mother Nature. The power went out across the neighborhood. I helped guide her back to her door, though she barely thanked me before slamming it shut behind her. I returned to my own home, drenched but safe. My fence still standing, barely but proudly. Hours passed before the storm finally began to calm. By morning, the street looked like a war zone, fallen branches, shredded siding and debris everywhere. But my fence? It was still up. Damaged, sure, but upright. Karen's house, however, wasn't as lucky. Her roof shingles were scattered all over the street. Her porch was flooded, and that shiny new fence, gone, completely flattened. As I stood there surveying the wreckage, Karen came outside, clutching her ruined clipboard, her hair a tangled mess. Her jaw dropped when she saw my fence still standing. How is that thing still up?" she asked, eyes wide. I smiled faintly. Guess it just needed a little care instead of criticism. She didn't laugh this time. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through gray clouds, revealing the full destruction left by the storm. The once pristine maple grove looked like a battlefield. Broken fences, shattered windows, and fallen trees littered every corner. Neighbors wandered out in disbelief, clutching coffee mugs and shaking their heads at the damage. I stepped onto my porch inspecting my fence. It wasn't perfect. Some panels were bent, nails poking out, but it was still standing, doing its job. My small victory didn't go unnoticed. Karen stood across the street, wrapped in a robe and holding her destroyed clipboard like a security blanket. Her perfect lawn was now a swamp, her flower beds drowned in mud, and her fence completely leveled. Only a few broken posts stuck out like gravestones of her pride. When our eyes met, I gave her a polite nod. "Morning, Karen. Rough night?" She scowled. "You could say that. My entire property's ruined. And where was the HOA when this happened? Useless, all of them." I bit back a laugh. "Well, I guess even HOA rules can't control Mother Nature." Her glare could have melted steel. "You think this is funny? My gutters are torn off, my roof's leaking, and my hydrangeas are gone." She stomped a muddy foot in frustration. That's when her husband, Bob, a quiet, soft-spoken man rarely seen outside, stepped out behind her carrying a toolbox. "Karen, maybe we should start cleaning instead of blaming everyone?" She spun on him. "Bob, this is serious. We pay HOA dues for protection against things like this." Bob sighed deeply. "Karen, no amount of paperwork can stop a storm." A few neighbors chuckled under their breath. Karen's face turned crimson. Still, she wasn't one to back down. By the afternoon, she was already pacing the street, with a new clipboard, somehow salvaged from the chaos, and talking to everyone about filing complaints. Her main target? The HOA itself. The HOA should have had a storm prevention plan. "A cleanup team! An emergency fund!" she yelled, voice echoing through the neighborhood. "If we all complain together, we can demand compensation." Most people ignored her, too busy sweeping debris or fixing fences. But of course, she marched up to me next. "Tom, you're handy. You should report your fence damage, too. I'm drafting a group letter." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, but I'm good. I built my fence myself. I'll rebuild it if needed." Her nostrils flared. "You can't just ignore the HOA's process." I shrugged. "Worked fine through the storm." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she seemed unsure of what to say. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize that her rules meant nothing when nature decided to play by its own. But of course, Karen being Karen, she wasn't done yet. Because by that evening, she had a new plan. One that would drag me into the mess whether I liked it or not. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again, not with cleanup crews, but with gossip. Word spread fast that Karen had filed an official complaint to the HOA board, blaming me for negligence that contributed to storm damage. When I read the email she had copied everyone on, I nearly choked on my coffee. Tom Reed's broken fence created wind, tunnels that worsened the storm's impact on surrounding properties, she wrote. This shows his disregard for community safety. It was absurd. The storm had torn apart half the town, yet somehow I was the villain in her story. I walked over to her driveway where she stood, arms crossed, wearing a brand new visor like the storm never happened. "Karen," I said calmly, "you're seriously blaming me for wind?" She lifted her chin. "Your damaged fence made things worse. Tom, if you'd fixed it when I told you, maybe my fence wouldn't be destroyed." "Karen," I sighed. The storm tore the community sign out of concrete. "You think my fence did that?" Before she could answer, Bob came out again, carrying a tarp. "Karen, leave the man alone. You've already embarrassed yourself enough." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me?" He pointed toward their house. "You've been bullying everyone in this neighborhood for years, writing people up for mailbox colors, lawn lengths, holiday lights. Maybe it's time you stop blaming others and start fixing your own mess." For a moment, the Queen of Maple Grove stood frozen. The neighbors, quietly gathered nearby, looked on in stunned silence. I almost felt bad for her, almost. But karma wasn't done yet. That afternoon, another set of dark clouds began to roll in. It wasn't a storm this time, just heavy rain. Still, everyone scrambled to secure what they could, especially Karen, who had left her broken roof half-covered. I watched from my porch as she and Bob argued under the drizzle. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed. The temporary plastic sheet over her roof ripped free, sending a cascade of rain straight into her living room. Karen screamed in horror as water poured down her curtains. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, floating down her flooded porch like a defeated little raft. Bob turned to her quietly. "Maybe if you'd helped others instead of laughing at them, someone would have helped you now." Karen didn't reply. For once, she had no words, no rules, and no one to boss around. Later that evening, she showed up at my door, soaked and silent. "Tom," she muttered, I need help." "Do you still have that tarp?" I handed her one without saying much. She took it, eyes down. "Thank you." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing Karen Morrison would ever manage. As she walked away into the rain, I looked at my patched fence, still standing strong, and smiled. Sometimes life doesn't need revenge. It just needs a good storm.